This is our presentation to the 1863 to the 1877 Reconstruction by Kobe, David, Chris, and Samuel.
What is the Emancipation Proclamation? On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln declared the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all the slaves in the United States. With this, the aim of the war changed to include the freeing of slaves in addition to preserving the Union. However, it did not free all the slaves as it only affected 10 of the states. Not only that, but it prevented European forces from intervening in the war on behalf of the Confederacy.
What did slaves do after the Emancipation Proclamation? Different slaves wanted different things after they were freed. Like stated earlier, some wanted to stay at the plantations that they were born at, but others wanted to get their own land and work for themselves. The Sea Island Documents. The Sea Island Documents is a series of important letters involving work and land issues that former slaves were having post Emancipation Proclamation. The freedmen wrote these letters to the President Abraham Lincoln in 1864 in South Carolina. The slaves who wanted to live on their own land and work for themselves were having trouble gaining ownership of the land they lived on. One former slave was promised by their former owner, Mr. Philbrick, that they would be sold as much land as they wanted to buy, but the promise wasn't being upheld. Another was inquiring about being able to buy the land they were living on, but wasn't being responded to.
In the letter by W.M.H. Reynolds, Treasury Department cotton agent, to the Secretary of the Treasury, in January 1st, 1862, this document confirms that Negroes of the plantations were very well pleased with their new setting and the new order. Reynolds was all for the people of labor to get paid for their labor. He believed with proper pay, workers they would be able to expand in one of the oldest slave holding states to try and produce cotton with paid labor.
As previously mentioned, this letter was written by the South Carolina freedmen to the president in March 1st, 1864. After Mr. Philbrook purchased all the land and the freedmen were unable to purchase land, they had two solutions in mind for that. One of them was that Mr. Philbrick would keep his promise and sell them as much land as they wanted for the homes at a fair cost. And if that was not possible, the other was to pray that the government would buy the land and then let the former slaves live in the farm while giving the government one half of everything that is grown on the soil.
Another issue former slaves were having. Back then, there wasn't many stores available to purchase as there is today. Once the slaves were freed, they didn't have stores they could go to and get supplies they needed. This leads to their former owners setting up a shop that the slaves can shop at. Owners of the shop makes the items overpriced so that the people working for him, since they are now freed, spend all the money they earn on supplies they need, which basically gives them the money back to the owner and makes it so the workers owe him money.
A meeting between black religious leaders and Union military authorities. So this meeting was held on January 12, 1865 by the former slaves, between former slaves and military officers, including an important figure, General Sherman. The meeting was to interview African Americans to see their understanding of the emancipation and their beliefs toward the US government, such as their position on the war and of the South. One former slave, Garrison Frazier, was to be the spokesman for the African Americans who were present during the meeting. Were the slaves prepared for life in a free market society? For the situation, they were well prepared. In the first letter, the people had an agreement, but the landowner broke the contract, which wasn't the former slave's fault. Also, in both cases, the freed people had money to pay for the land that they wanted. In the second letter, the person already had cotton planted on the land, and others had acres of crops, where they all had a future ideas about the land already.
After all the land being returned to its original owners, ordered by President Johnson, it created sharecropping. All that came to change to the point where freed slaves were able to purchase land. Because of the Reconstruction, Amendment 14 took place that gave the people equal protection, citizenship, and Bill of Rights in all states. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation.